All right, starting Be'ez Hashem, Perek Lamed Hey. Excuse me if we go a little bit fast, because I want to try and finish the Perek, so that we could do it in one shot, which will be Gavaldik. So we've learned previously this idea of the Beinanim, right? This Beinani that Lemaisa has to work primarily on his external garments. The external garments that we always talk about, which is Machshava Dibur Maisa, the thought, speech, and action. Because a general Beinani is not someone that can actually turn himself into being a tzaddik. He can't have an inner connection all the time. Something we mentioned yesterday, that the Ovos were able to have this connection the whole time. A regular person is not able to have that connection the whole time. Now, that's what we've been working primarily on and speaking about. Now the Tanya wants to discuss which type, how is it that this type of work is the most precious to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Let's have a look. If you remember, right in the beginning, and we've mentioned this a few times, that the Ganze Tanya is really built on this pasuk, right? Everything is, it's Korv Elecha, Beficha V'Vavcha, La'asoisoi. It means it sounds like the end goal is not just Beficha V'Vavai, but also La'asoisoi, to do, the action. What is it that's so great about La'asoisoi? Let's explain more about the word which the whole Sefer of Tanya is based on, is La'asoisoi. V'gam Lahavim, we also have to understand, Ma'at Mizer Tachlis Briasa Beinanim, V'yiridas Nishmoiseyem La'olam Hazeh, Lislabish B'nefesh Bahamis, Shema Klipa V'Sitra Acha, Ma'acha Shla Yochel Shachol Kol Yemem L'Tchoisum L'Mokoyim L'Chol Asmoni Shebalev Shal Yanim B'Menu Ruim and Amoyach. We'll stop there for a second. But really, we're asking a question, and that is, what was really the purpose with the Rabbeinu Shalom creating a Beinani who can never be more than a Beinani? You know how they tell you when you're a kid, oh, you're going to be a groiser tzaddik. So we don't want to break the news to anyone, and we've spoken about this many times before. You cannot necessarily be a tzaddik. You could be the best that you were sent down to be, and a chanami. You can utilize the purpose that you were sent down to the world, but you can never be a tzaddik. You're a Beinani, halavai a Beinani. It's a Lashon we've used many times, right? Which means, so what's the purpose of a Beinani? If we can never really turn our evil into toiv, we can't really have that tremendous love and that connection that a tzaddik has, so what's the purpose over here? The Rabbeinu Shalom could have created a situation where, and this is why he said, why is it that we're brought down and our neshama was brought la'olam hazeh lehislabesh b'nefesh habahamis shema klipa v'sitra acha? The Rabbeinu Shalom could have created a mitzias that the nefesh habahamis and the nefesh halakis each had its own independent access to the body, as opposed to the Rabbeinu Shalom putting in the nefesh halakis into the nefesh habahamis. What's the point and purpose of that? At the end of the day, a Beinani cannot turn his Nefesh Habahamis into anything greater than that, because he's a Beinani and he cannot get greater than that. So what's the whole purpose of him coming down to the world? That's the kasha of the Tanya. Okay? Kima husuvat smusa shel Nefesh Habahamis shema klipehi betokva gvurosa esam kutel dalto. At the end of the day, the Nefesh Habahamis that you have inside you, with all of those inclinations leading you in the wrong direction, and all those Yetzaharas, are going to remain that strong. It's going to remain that strong your entire lifetime. It's not pshat that it's going to get any easier. It's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be a struggle, and we've spoken about that. It's the struggle that the Rabbeinu Shalom created us to be able to overcome. That's our purpose. It's not the pshat that the struggle is bad. A struggle is not b'di'eved. It's not like, oh, never, you're in a struggle situation. No, faket. The Rabbeinu Shalom created you for that struggle. That could be your purpose in this world. So if that's what he's asking, that everything's going to remain in that way. Rak. At the end of the day, the Nefesh Bahamis is not able to influence the body, because at the end of the day, it's a Beinani, and he's not any greater than that. Him came. Back to the kasha. What is the purpose that this neshama, which we all have, has come down to this world? Liga lorik chas v'shalom, to work for nothing. Basically, to toil for no necessity, because again, we can't get any higher. We'll never get to be a tzaddik. So what are we doing here? Lilachim kol yameim, to fight the whole life. And they'll never manage. It's not the pshat that if you keep on fighting, you'll manage to win your Yetzirah and you won't have the Yetzirah anymore. No. You're going to have a Yetzirah until the day that you die. The Rambam says in Echos Tshuva also, by the way. So therefore, if that's the case for a Beinani, again, a tzaddik is a different avodah. But for us, halavaya Beinani, what is the purpose? We're just fighting the Yetzer Hara our entire life for what? And if we answer this, then perhaps that will be what we call the nechama, the consolement. Yeah. What's another word? The nechama. Condolences. Okay. All the good English. Very good. Whatever it is. In other words, he feels that if he understands the reason why he's sent down, then he'll understand the purpose why he's here, and he'll actually have simcha for being here, as opposed to feeling that I'm in a b'diavad existence. Really, I'm meant to be someone else or something else, but like, what do you want me to do? This is who I am. You are, right now, the most lechatchila. You are the way you're meant to be. Let's have a look. V'hu. Bahagdim loshen yanuka. Right, the Yanukas are famous now, it's becoming more and more famous, the Yanuka. This, by the way, is where it comes. The Zohar Parshas Balak, coming up in a few weeks, that the Zohar calls someone who knows a lot of Torah at a very young age a Yanuka. Right, Yonik is a child, right? So Al Posek comes from a Posek in Koheles, Hechocham Einov Baroshai. Right, literally, in translation would be, a wise person has his eyes in his head. Right, the Zohar Kodesh, this is not the Tanya, this is the Zohar Kodesh. V'chibon asa, that's why the Lashon is slightly different. I don't understand. Where else is his eyes going to be? Like, what's Pshat? Shlomo Melech, right? Chocham Kol Adam is telling us that Chocham has his eyes in his head. Well, asks the Zohar, where else are his eyes going to be? And Akroch Yuvadai, the Tnan Lo Yahab Barnash, Begilu Dureisha, Arba Amos. So what it means really is, it's not literally in the physical way that your eyes are in your head. Of course your eyes are in your head, where else are they going to be? But rather, you're not going Dalad Amos without an uncovered head. In other words, you don't take off your yarmulke and walk for 4 Amos. What's the connection? My time, I like one of my shaykhs. The Shechinte Sharial Reishe. The Zohar Kodesh, the Shechina rests on your head. The Chol Chacham, and any wise person, this is how the Zohar Kodesh is learning Pshat in the Pasuk in Koheles, a Chacham ein v'roshai, a Chacham einoyu milu b'reisha inun bahu d'shari v'kaima al reisha. That means the eyes and the words of a wise person are on his head. That means his focus is that which is on his head. Dahainu, the Shechina. He understands that the Shechina rests on his head, v'kad eine tamon, and when his eyes are there, meaning, not in a physical way his eyes are there, he realizes the Shechina is present. Linda dahuna hoira da'adlik al reisha, again this is all the quote from the Zohar Kodesh, al reisha itzruk l'mishcha, which means he realizes that he has a flame on his head that requires oil, as we will give a Rosh in a moment. Begin to guva de banash iupsila unhoira adlik le'ela. Our body is the wick, and the flame is lit above that. Okay? Ushloima malkot sovach va'ama, Shlomo Melech, again this is all the quote from the Zohar Kodesh, is screaming and he's saying, V'shemen al roshcha al yechsa dahoira de berosh isruk lemishka, because at the end of the day the wick needs to light. How do you light it? With oil. The in and uvda de tova, and the oil over here refers to good deeds. That's the oil that keeps the flame going. Wow. So this is the Zohar's explanation of Shlomo Melech's Pasuk in Koheles, Chacham Einav B'roshai. We understood it means that a wise person has his eyes in his head. It's not what it means. It means you want the oil to light the wick that's on top of your head where the Shechina rests. You need to do good deeds. You need to do Maisim Tovim. Let's explain. Now we're going to have the Heilige Tanya explaining what that means. V'hine, Beru Moshel Zeh. What is this Moshel that the Zohar Kodesh is bringing us? Let's explain it a little bit down to earth so that we can understand it. That the Zohar Kodesh is basically giving us a Moshel, that the light, the illumination of the Shechina is comparable to the light of an air. We all know you can have a beautiful wick, but if you don't have any oil, then the light's nothing's going to happen. Maybe the wick will light for a few seconds, but eventually it's just going to die. It's going to extinguish, right? The Shechina is not going to rest on a guf of a person that is compared to a psila, a wick, ella, only, when you do good deeds. You do a good deed, you do a mitzvah, you do something that you do, you are basically allowing the oil to come in, which will light the wick of your neshama, which allows the Shechina to come down. V'dafka, v'loi dailoi b'nishmosai, she chelek arakam emal lios kashem and psila. It's not enough to cause the Shechina just to rest on the body, just because you have a chelek elakam emal mamish that we spoke about right in the beginning. Of other, we have a chelek elakam emal mamish, but don't think that because you have within you a piece of neshama, that's the reason why the Shechina can rest on you. You need oil. You need to, you need fuel. It needs to go on something. How do you do that? Maisim tovim, and that's a very, very big yesod. Let's continue to explain. This is again understood to anyone that understands anything with any intellect. The neshama of a person, even if it's a huge tzaddik, over Hashem b'yira v'ava b'tanugim. Aber pikein ain't betele b'mitzias legam de bottle v'kladu or Hashem mamish lias lachodim v'chodim b'yichud gomo rak hu davu b'fnei atzma yira Hashem v'oyavoi. Right? In other words, you're not one with Hashem. Masha'enkana mitzvahs u'maisim tovim. In other words, you could be a wonderful person, but you're a separate entity. You're not one with the Shechina. Whereas Masha'enkan, he says, ha-mitzvahs u'maisim tovim shehein, which are ritzono yisbarach. We spoke about that yesterday. Right? Perek Lamed Daled. We spoke about the mitzvahs that we have and the details of the mitzvahs and the halachas that we keep are not just stam. They're there because it's the rotzen of the Rabbeinu Shalom, or it's soina yisparuchu mekor achayim, and the rotzen of Hashem is the source of all life. L'choloi lomos aburim sheyerid alem elidei tzimtzumim rabim v'hesta pom sherotzen la'elim baruchu v'yividis amadrigas at yochel yisaber baros yesh ma'ayim v'dov nifel b'nei atzmoi v'rebatim mitzias kanal. In other words, everything we see in this physical world was through tzimtzumim. Dilution had to get diluted with hest upon him of the Ratzon HaElyon, which is covering up, as we spoke about previously. The table that we have over here is really the Ratzon Hashem. It's just been diluted and hest upon him that we see a table, but really it's the Machshov of the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's what a mitzvah is. That's what a Maisim Tovim is. It's the Metzias of the world. It's the Makor of everything. Now that's the physical thing that we see. But the actual mitzvahs, right, the mitzvahs that are not physical necessarily, where there's no hester, their life source, their energy, is not separate to them. They are one with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It manifests in that thing that thing is included in the illumination of Hashem, or and it's got no mitzias of its own. When something's mavatal itself, it becomes bottled to something else and now becomes part of the main. So they are mavatal the mitzias themselves to the das the Rebbeinu Shalom, so it becomes a chelik of Hashem. Sha'oz hu sheshorim skala by Hashem echad, avokol ma'ashalai bottle leilo mitzias legamri. Anything that's not nullified, wasn't bottle itself completely, then ein or Hashem shorim skala boy. Then the Or Hashem is not going to be shayr in it and revealed in it. Even if you have a huge tzaddik, he also can't be a vehicle for the Hashem Echad with the Abba Rabba. There's no thought that can grab the Rebbeinu Shalom, that can really comprehend and understand Rebbeinu Shalom. Ki amitas Hashem alakim emesu, yichudu v'achdusai, shehu levadu v'efes b'l odei mamish. In other words, it's impossible to grasp the reality of that there's nothing else but Hashem, something that we have spoken about numerous times. It's almost like when you look into the mirror and you see yourself and say, I don't exist. What does that mean? I'm looking in the mirror, I see me. In other words, you don't really exist, right? You're just seeing a reflection of something that's physical, that's brought down and with all the dilution, everything that we've spoken about. The same way you cannot grasp that, you can also not grasp the oneness of the Rebbeinu Shalom. V'im kein, zeh ha'oyev shu yesh lo v'le'efes. A person who loves the Rebbeinu Shalom because he's a separate entity and not a nothing. Les machshava delay tfisa beklal ve'eina Hashem shoyim esgalaboy ela al yedei. The only way that he can get the Shechina because he himself is a separate entity. Memele, he can't have the Shechina on him himself. It needs to come on the outside. I hope the olim will follow me. I know it's a little bit much. Ve'eina Hashem shoyim esgalaboy ela. The only way to get the Shechina, to get the Shechina to come down to be showing him Bahamis Ella al Yedei Kiyam HaMitzvos. By doing mitzvahs, Shein Mitzvos V'Chachmas Yisbach Mamish B'li Shom Hester upon him. Because a mitzvah has no hester upon him. There's nothing covering up, there's no concealment. So when you do a mitzvah, you're literally connecting yourself in a real way to the Shechina, and you're allowing the Shechina to reside on you. V'hine, let's continue by saying, even though L'maisa, Torah is a mitzvah, and Torah is the greatest mitzvah of the world, the Zohar is going to tell us that Chesed and Maisa and Tovim is actually what causes the Shechina to rest on you. Kisha'odam oisik b'Torah, when a person is sitting and learning, Azayin nishmosoi shi menafshei lekis im shnei levusheha, with all of the coverings, the clothings, hapnimis lavadim sheim koyach hadibu machshava, right, which is the koyach of speech, umachshava, right, thought process, nichlolois ba'or Hashem, we're absorbed in the light of Hashem, ein soy baruch hu, yuchodus by bichud gamu, v'yashras hashchina nafsha lekis k'mayim rabbeinu zal shafidu echad she'yeshav oisav v'torah shchina imoy. That when a person is learning Torah, he brings down the Shechina onto the nefesh lekis that he has, and the two garments, the inner garments that we spoke about, machshava and the dibur, the thought and the speech, it doesn't affect the action, the last soy, that garment not, but it only affects machshava and dibur, because again, at the end of the day, that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting and learning, I'm affecting machshava, my thought process, and my dibur, my speech. That's what happens when I learn. So that when I do that, I'm affecting those two items of clothing. Okay? Sorry, a bit long. But I want the Shechina to be on my guf, v'nafshay Bahamis. I want the Shechina to be on my nefesh Bahamis. Shiachiyunis amulubeshes begufei mamish. Tzog l'kay mitzvahs maisis. For that, I need to do an action. For that, it's not enough just to learn. For learning is beautiful, that it will affect my machshava and my dibur. But if I want to affect my guf, I want it to go and be absorbed in my nefesh Bahamis, my animalistic soul. For that, I need to do an action. Because an action, that's the source at the beginning of the parak, by the way. Guf mamish, because when you give tzedakah, when you do a chesed for someone, whatever, put on tefillin, whatever it is, because now the strength that the body is using by doing the mitzvah is included in the Or Hashem, because it's being used as a vehicle for the mitzvah. And that's the third garment. That's the what's it called? The action. So now the koyach of the nefesh abehema, right? The nefesh hachayunis, which is in the body, which comes from klibas noiga. I've allowed it to turn from bad to good. Now we understand the kasha. We asked originally, why would the Rabboni Shalom put the nefesh lekis into the nefesh